The following episode contains fictitious descriptions of the heinous actions of a cold-hearted, insidious individual. There will be mention of gore, torture, and vulgarity, as well as mentioning detailed crime scenes. Despite this being a 100% fictional case, we do understand if anyone skips this episode, as it is not for the faint of heart. As for why this episode came to be, in short, I wanted the two of us to test our acting and writing abilities. Both of us, Dom and Jake, are equal part the author of this case. That said, you will quickly notice Dom will act as if all of this is new information. That's intentional. A lot of the true crime podcasts do exactly that. One host usually has all the research while the other isn't as knowledgeable or has never even heard of the cases before. With that said, for those of you who wish to proceed, be warned. Welcome to another episode of the DomJake podcast. I'm Jake.
And I'm Dom.
How's your day been, man?
It was average, but it was good. How was yours?
Yeah, you know what? I could say the same virtually. Kind of doing some last-minute cramming for this episode. Because, serious things are a little bit of a slog to get through. But, regardless,
well,
you actually don't know what this one's about, so that's interesting.
Well, now that you've caught my curiosity, what is this about?
All right, I guess I could go directly with it. Do you know about true crime?
I have before, seen a lot of those crime shows on A&E, Ion, you name it.
Yeah, any of the podcasts that might be out there? Any of them?
No.
Well, that's interesting because today we're going to be doing one. I have decided to participate in the trend and bring you a case that I found.
All right.
Which,
I'm curious about this.
True crime is a bit of a heavy topic, so take that into consideration, Dom. Since I did kind of do a bit of... Okay, that's an understatement. I did a lot of research on this case. There is a lot to this, so I guess the best action to take is to just start it at the beginning. I guess in summary, I could give you an overall about this case. I don't know if you've heard of it before, because from my research, it hasn't really been that big. I mean, there are some articles out there, but it seems to have flown under the radar a little bit, which is pretty interesting. But I'm curious, Dom, have you ever heard of the attic attacker?
Attic attacker of all places. Oh, this guy attacks people in the attic. I have not heard of this. Sounds really new to me.
All right, cool. Well, it's, I guess, a blessing and a curse for you that I am the one to teach you about this. So, essentially, in summary, which we will get into the steps in detail a little bit later, but to kind of give you a brief overall, the case is the attic attacker. A series of murder victims were found in various attics all around Alberta, New Mexico. At first, these deaths were all ruled as single and separate murders, but weren't really linked together until two investigating officers. Investigators Duvois and Benson, on the scene of the fourth victim's case, soon figured out that there was a pattern, and that this case matched with a few other crime scenes throughout the state. Looking further, the pair of them realized that the body parts, which we'll get into a little bit later, because I kind of want to keep the big juice from you. So I'm not going to go over that part. Pretend like I crossed out a little thing that you have to solve with me later. There we go. Each victim had been strangled with convenient bindings, slapped in the face, and all of them had been posed to highlight a certain thing that I'm going to redact right now. We will get, like I said, into it later on. The only difference between these victims is obviously that they were different people and that they had, my God, once again, I have to scratch that little part out because I kind of want you to kind of be guessing as we go. So that's why I'm kind of virtually scratching this out. So, I guess a really good place to start with this would be with the victims, right? Because it's obviously a bad thing that we ended up losing. That we ended up losing 5 individuals because of this. And since it was done out of malice, we should respect the 5 who have let's just say left this mortal plane.
Mm-hmm.
So, in an attempt to be as respectful as possible, I'll go over the victims with you. First, we have 22-year-old Sandra Wilcox. At the time, she was 22. So she was a cheerleader for the local high school football team and excelled at it. Her grades were high, and her spirits were even higher. Everyone seemed to like her. She was one of the cheerleaders who took a role off the field too, boosting everybody's morale. After a few years had passed since high school, she became a role model for upcoming cheerleaders who were elementary, middle school aged ones, and she eventually became a teacher. Everyone followed her lead, and she knew all the dance routines, and unfortunately for the young cheerleaders, one day the cheerleader, or I guess the former cheerleader at this point, got murdered in the attic by the attic attacker when she was looking for her mom's old cheerleader clothes for a specific project that she wanted to, I guess, do with the younger students. Now, crime scene investigators noticed that she had been bound with a guitar string that had been strangled with a 2-inch diameter rope. And, well, she had a black Sharpie X marked on her forehead. There was a memorial for the cheerleader a week after she was killed.
Oh my god! Wow. Imagine now that. Imagine now that imprint that left on those cheerleaders.
I mean, yeah, it's something else because obviously she was a big beacon in her community. Otherwise, I don't think she would have gotten a big memorial like that. But
Mm,
it's obviously one of those things where you kind of have a hard time finding words to express grief like this because she sounded like a real one, right? Like
22
it
years old. That's
yeah,
young.
it certainly is, and honestly, unfortunately, some of the other victims are younger than that. Um, but yeah, uh, Sandra Wilcox is definitely going to be remembered in the community for sure. Next up on the victim list, we have Oliver Newman. He was 20 years old, not 22 like Sandra was. 20 at the time of this event. Now, he was a drifter from Boston, Maine. In other words, he had nowhere to go. Not a lot is known about this victim, as it seems the victim's DNA doesn't even share a familiar bond with anyone in the database at the investigative office. Um, what is known about this case is Oliver was originally referred to as John Doe, which, for those of you who don't know, just means anonymous male figure, um, which is pretty sad whenever you think about other cases where they have to go by John Doe because you don't know. Luckily, I mean, it's obviously not lucky that any of this happened to Oliver, but luckily we were able to get a name for the guy. Um, but obviously, he went as John Doe for a while. He was referred to as that because it wasn't
Well,
really. Um,
he's anonymous.
and there's a good reason why he was anonymous. Um, do you possibly have any idea as to what that could be?
It's probably couple of factors. Either he didn't want to be well known, or I don't know, or people just don't have enough information about him. I don't know. There's plenty of factors.
And honestly, both of those kind of are accurate, but also not the full 100% truth. Well,
Yep.
obviously, the two of us are not Oliver, so we don't really know what the real reason was, but um, he wasn't originally from the town. That's really why it was a John Doe until a revolutionary thought that Detective Cletus Brown uh, had. So Cletus Brown was an investigator, or I guess detective at that point, um, who called over many precincts of other states to try to find like the most probable name for the victim, right? Um, and Oliver happened to match this, and Oliver just so happened to match the description of the victim. Um, so for a big part of it, it was kind of speculated because sometimes you can't really be certain that this runaway from this state that just so happens to match the time, the estimated time when they arrived in this town, it's some of it is guesswork, and
It just sounds too convenient to me.
How so?
Like, oh, they were just speculating, but just so happens to be a match.
Which you could think it's convenience, but
Well, not for the good though, but
um, the details of how this even happened to Oliver were only revealed after an interrogation with the killer. So I guess scratch what I said before, cut that out about the familiar DNA, because whoops.
hmm.
The details of how this even happened to Oliver were only revealed after an interrogation with the killer. If we are to believe them, then they claim that they knocked Oliver out in an alleyway late into the night and dragged him into a car, and then proceeded to drive to where the body was found. Um, Obviously, more things would have happened after the car, which, yeah, um,
Hmm.
we will get to. The detective then continues to dig around for more information about what happened for the past 4 days. Um, Nothing has been found about the incident. However, Detective Brown finally found some information about Oliver. It turns out the information was pretty accurate. Um, One day, he was walking down a normal neighborhood street, going home from a part-time job he had before he switched to another. Um, Out of nowhere, the attic attacker knocks Oliver out. After getting knocked out, Oliver was then bound with duct tape and strangled by hand. In addition, Oliver had a black X drawn on his abdomen.
So, of course, the first one there was like a black X, and now the second one there's a black X.
There, there definitely is. There is that. Um, you are kind of smart for for kind of picking up on that, but luckily it doesn't seem like you found the, I guess, smoking gun of this case. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it,
Which we'll probably talk about later, but
it will come up. That's the whole reason why in the summary of the whole case I kind of, I guess, metaphorically crossed out a few details, which you picked up on the fact that the X's are in some way important.
mm-hmm. That's like, God, it's like so sad.
It definitely is a pair. I mean, especially whenever it comes to the fact that it wasn't even from here. It was just leaving his original place for, at this point, only he knows or knew what the reason was. He left his home to pursue something else. And this is what happened.
Hmm. All right. So, is there any more people?
3 more, which, no disrespect to any of the other ones.
Of course.
Um, but so John Davis was an 18-year-old high school graduate, just getting ready to go to college, like any, well, not any
Eh,
other, like most his age. John was quite the football jock that all the freshmen and sophomore high school girls had a crush on. Um, he would have he would have posters made of him whenever a game happened. He was like that number one guy, he's the Peyton Manning or whatever,
It's like
right?
talk about a stereotype here. He's like Like that jock that everyone liked.
I mean, he was what most people would call a popular kid in school, definitely. All this came to an end, however, shortly after finals were done. Um, so usually you would just, graduate high school and that would be the end of it. Well, this turned the end of it into a different way, I guess.
It really sounds like it gave a whole new meaning to an end.
Uh, so so then, like most kids, he enjoyed and embraced his summer vacation. Nothing really too out of the ordinary with that one. August hit, and then he was preparing to go to college. He had one idea before going there, though. He decided to go to the attic to look for any items that he wanted to bring with him. He looked in dozens of boxes for about an hour, and by the hour and 30-minute mark, footsteps were heard, and John at first thought it was just his parents in the attic, and didn't think really much about it. But then the footsteps became increasingly louder. Before he could even react and get scared or show any emotion, the killer popped up out of nowhere and strangled John while smiling. However, this one happened to have somewhat of a witness. John's father had heard choking noises coming from the attic and immediately ran up. He found his son on the ground, but doesn't see the killer. Cops were then called, and the parents were then asked to stay in the living room while the cops investigate the crime scene, because
So,
obviously they needed to rule out a suspect. They needed to rule out the fact that Tony Davis, John's father, um,
he's like, this guy has some kind of thing for addicts. And somebody camping in them until they find the victim.
yeah, this one, and I'm going to spoil it a little bit for you, like a little bit. This isn't going to get into like really the final spoiler, but um, this was just literally a chance encounter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not necessarily that he was camping out, or I should say that the attic attacker was camping out. It was just John was bad place, bad time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which the strange thing about it is, after further investigation, the Davis household only had the parents in it. Yeah, you'll see why that's, I guess, important later on, possibly. Um, I told myself I would try to get through these victims a little bit quicker, but you know what? That's probably best to kind of give them some time because, their lives were snuffed out before they were supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Someone took them away from their communities.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are not from that community, but
Still,
it's still
a
worth
life was
mentioning.
taken.
It's still something you can sympathize with,
Mm-hmm.
as I'm sure. Yeah. Um, Next up is Lila Martinez, a 25-year-old artist known for her vibrant murals around the town. She brought life to dull spaces, using every corner as her canvas. Lila's artistic spirit extended beyond the streets. She was on a quest for inspiration in an abandoned warehouse, seeking the raw materials for her next masterpiece. After leaving the warehouse, she finds a way back to her car, and on the way, she unfortunately gets knocked out with a glass bottle. It doesn't shatter on impact. Um, it doesn't shatter on impact. Her knocked out body was then transported to another house's attic and was then staged post mortem. The crime scene revealed that she was bound with duct tape as well and was strangled with a pair of socks. Not only that, but black X was found on her nose.
The fuck is going on with this guy?
Yeah, it's
Jeez. This guy has no mercy.
oh yeah. Another case of everyone kind of knew her around the town, kind of. Not as much as Sandra Wilcox, but her murals were seen all throughout town. Like, everyone would have known, hey, that mural, that's the mural that we all see in like
Like whatever town, right?
yeah.
Seems like one of those cases where, hey, this guy does not like seeing others be happy, so this guy had to ruin it for everybody.
Well, the odd thing with that, and obviously once again we're going off of speculation, but the thing about Oliver was that none of the people in the town really knew him. So I kind of have a feeling that the attic attacker was just picking random people. That's what it feels like.
Maybe. Well, yep, that, and I don't know, yeah. Mostly that. It's a little bit of, I don't know. Oh, this person wants to spread positivity. Oh, I'm not happy, so they can't be either. But that's just my like perspective. But it does sound like this guy just like goes victim to victim here.
Yeah, and relatively a short amount of time too. All of this pretty much taking 2, 3 months. Um, all of them during summer break, which is, I mean, it's unfortunate no matter what time it is, but there's something else that's a little bit, I would say, a little bit more messed up about it being, oh, we're all gonna be going on vacation soon. Whoa, beach vacation, having fun, swimming pools, all of that. Oh, some of us aren't gonna make it there, right? Like, eh, all of that is unfortunate. However, we gotta move on to the last of the attic attacker's victims, which is 19-year-old Ethan Turner. Now, Ethan Turner was an aspiring musician with a love for busking in the city. Ethan harmonized with the heartbeat of the streets, playing various instruments to connect with each passerby. He was very great at what he did. Tragically, as he was packing up for the day, he was then approached by someone and he was taken to a car for a ride.
Something like a cab or something.
I'm glad you thought of it that way, because this driver was not the attic attacker. There it was actually a kind person, right? This driver was the last known person to have seen Ethan alive. So she was taken in for questioning. You obviously have to try to clear people up. Now, that's the same what happened with Mr. Davis. After she was cleared, she was told to then go home and call the precinct if anything came up. The killer had struck Ethan while he was entering his friend's house entrusted to him to house sit. He was then knocked out in the living room and was then strangled by hand and was bound by several phone charger wires. Not only this, the killer also left a black X on his kneecaps. So there's the black X's again.
There it is.
The streets that once resonated with his music now carried an eerie silence, a void that could never be filled again. Now, similarly to Miss Wilcox, every Tuesday at 5 p.m., a group of buskers play in his spot in solidarity of his passing.
At 19, wow. This is just sad. A musician that was like brought music to everyone's ears, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
And now this should beg the question to any of the officers. First of all, the first thing is the X. And second of all, like, they're noticing, okay, why are these people getting attacked in the attic of all places? It's just a pattern that these officers haven't really picked much up on.
And eventually, like I said in the beginning, officers and investigators do end up finding the connections that you're
Well,
kind
just
of.
in this specific time frame, though, wouldn't they start questioning? Why does this keep happening here?
That's what I've been saying though.
Yeah.
In Lila Martinez's case, the investigators Duvois and I always forget the second guy's name. Duvois and Benson
Yeah.
both do notice this. Like by Lila Martinez, they notice that, wait a minute, X's? I mean, they're obviously linked, but if it was the same person, would it mean that it should all be on the forehead, for instance? Because there are definitely links to all of these cases. All of them have been bound, but different things, but still bound. All of them had slaps on their face. All of them are strangled. By, of course, different things as well. But the fact of the matter that they all had black X's is obviously a thing that should honestly have taken maybe the second victim to see that that those two were linked. But you'll see why it was probably a better idea. And this does sound bad, but it was a better idea to wait for the whole picture to be seen, because you will see it. I am glad you're picking up on the black X's, though. You picked up on it on the second victim. How about, before going on with the case, do you want to possibly talk about the backstory of the killer?
I'd be glad to. And And this, all right.
So, and let's spend, I guess, a quick amount of time with this, in lack of other terms, scumbag.
All right.
So we will not spend as much time on his summary as we have the 5 victims. This killer, like a lot of other killers, started out as a normal little kid. However, he had a rough upbringing as a kid, as he grew up in an unstable household with a single parent. His mother was physically abusive when things got stressful. Um, However, like every young child, they do need that parental connection, and whenever he wanted anything from his mom, she was either neglectful or she got so upset that she slaps him hard on the face. We'll put a star next to that one right there. Um, this has happened throughout the killer's childhood, which built up his anger and resentment and brought out the worst of him by adulthood. As it turns out, the killer seems to have had an on and off switch. He was able to live a normal life in school with no issues. His grades were great, his social life was ideal. He lived 2 very different lives during the most crucial moments, one of professional respect and one of abuse. When he eventually moved out of his childhood home, he was able to quickly get into a lucrative college field of study with all of his skills. He then went on to become a professional laminate and fabrication technician, which had him familiar with all household endeavors. He started his work He started working somewhere to do with his profession, but due to unforeseen events, he was fired shortly after. And after spending some time being treated with respect, only to be fired like that, did not sit well with him. Let's just say he had the last straw, and this was that moment.
So, like, this does sound like a pattern with these criminals. They grow up with a bad upbringing, and there, they just, like a switch, they become crazy.
However, it is great to also mention that not that's not the case with every single one,
No,
which is interesting. It's
says most.
there's obviously like a correlation between a lot, but it's not the case all the time.
No, not all the time.
Like there are definitely events where it's like nothing is wrong with someone. They have the happiest life, but just out of nowhere a switch flips. Those are the events where it's more interesting, I would say. But it's obviously all tragic, but one being more, I guess, fascinating on a psychologically, on a study scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because people do study these types of people all the time, and it's the hope of a lot of people that if we can understand how things happen, we could see the signs before they happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but of course, in every study, there has to be harsh events that happen in order for them to even be found in the first place. Um, so
All right.
let's
So,
dive into. Oh, unless if you have anything,
I
do
mean,
you have
unless
any?
so, this guy probably has some psychological issues, which is, if case that's not obvious. So, I mean, yes, they have to have. Of course, there's got to be harsh events, but also there's also the saying where there's smoke, there's fire, and if somebody catches that, it should get immediate treatment. I
Which, I mean, treatment does, work. It has worked. But of course, every human is built differently. Not everything works the same way. Um,
All right.
so we can, I guess, give benefit of the doubt and say we do wish that this individual, the attic attacker, did get help whenever he was younger, or even before any of this happened. If he maybe called someone, but I guess that's the event of living alone. And you know what? On top of that, every time he asked for anything from his mother, he was always shut down. So maybe that's part of it too, where he just didn't even know you could ask for help anymore. Which that it's
Sounds.
although he's a scumbag for what he did, that still is sad. How it did get to that point
Mm-hmm.
where a switch had to be flipped.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Mm-hmm. It does.
So let's visit the original lineup. These were people who weren't necessarily cleared right away, because sometimes investigators ask questions right away and they don't bring them to the office. That was the case with Mr. Davis and Mrs. Davis, although Mr. Davis was the one who was in the like physically in the attic. Um, yeah, Miss Davis was just sitting on the couch because that's what Mr. Davis told her to do.
Mm-hmm.
Which takes a lot of guts to say, do not come follow me up to where this choking is. Um,
Yeah.
the original lineup consisted of Millie Donovan, Gabrielle Diaz, Sophie Miller, Isabella Ramirez, and Vincent Miller. We will get to all of these. Millie Donovan was a rival cheerleader, roughly the same age as Sandra. Their competitive spirits clashed on the cheerleading circuit, creating a tense but energized atmosphere during competitions. Sandra's success always seemed to overshadow Millie's achievements, fueling a rivalry that extended beyond the field. After their high school years, Millie then took a different path, but the competitive edge persisted. When Sandra's life tragically cuts short, Millie became an unsuspected suspect, leaving the town to question if their cheerleading rivalry had taken a more sinister turn. So pretty much
Hmm.
the only reason why she was thought of was really she was fleeing the crime scene. Really.
So yep.
She was
So she didn't.
leaving town,
She just didn't want to like be an accomplice or anything. It sounds like.
which I mean, it is kind of suspicious that someone would just so happen to leave when this event is happening, but to each their own, really.
But you still, I mean, you still gotta question it. But yeah.
Now, Gabriel Diaz is another drifter that was spotted near the scenes of Oliver and Ethan's deaths. Unbeknownst to the townsfolk, Gabriel had a troubled past marked by a series of mysterious encounters in different cities. The drifting lifestyle was a facade hiding a deeper connection to the victims' lives.
Mm-hmm.
That's mysterious.
Yeah. Even the whole drifting sounds like. Hmm. It's interesting.
I mean, people drift all over all the time. You see hitchhikers happen. You see people just walking from one town to another just to try something else out. A lot of the times it's because they just want a different start. They just want a different life, so they try to go for it.
Mhm.
That's definitely the case with Miss Diaz.
Yeah. All right.
Sophie Miller is a high school classmate with an unrequited crush on John Davis. Sophie's infatuation with him reached an obsessive level, and the more John basked in his popularity, the deeper her resentment grew. As the summer unfolded, Sophie's fixation intensified, especially knowing that John would soon be leaving. The attic, a place filled with memories and potential mementos of John, had become a focal point for Sophie's conflicted emotions. When the police investigated John's murder, Sophie found herself under suspicion due to her intense connection to the victim, and because of the many pictures of John she had in, well, her parents' attic. The discovery of John's lifeless body by his father only deepened the mysteries surrounding Sophie's true motives, and her role in the investigation added layers of complexity to the unfolding story.
Sounds like the typical. Oh, I like John, but then she realizes she's got competition with all these other people that like him.
His popularity is a monster, I could say.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like if you're close to someone before they get popular, and then out of nowhere they get popular, you might drift away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And some people do not like that drift.
Not at all.
It is very, very strange how Sophie had that shrine in her attic of John.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally, this case is the attic attacker. So
Yeah, and
that's worth noting.
yep. It's like attic attacker.
Isabella Ramirez is an ambitious art critic notorious for challenging Lila's artistic choices publicly. Isabella's critiques often bordered on personal attacks, leading to a strained relationship with Lila. Unbeknownst to many, Isabella struggled with her own insecurities and saw Lila's success as a threat to her own standing in
Of course.
the art world.
Projecting. She's projecting. Or she knows she's probably not as good as her, so she's got jealous.
Or even she might be better, but just because there's that sense of, well, just because you're better than me by, like, I guess, practice, you know, Lila might have more soul into those murals, right? There's a sense of what makes a professional is that they can breathe life into things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is not just someone who follows the directions word for word, like, yes, I drew a circle in the center because that's what the instructions told me to do. There's a sense
Mm-hmm.
of life in, you know what? I'm going to draw a star off center, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. You're questioning the rules there. That's breaking the norm. That's what a lot of art is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Vincent Miller. He was a street musician, resentful of Ethan's popularity. Vincent, once a promising musician himself, faced a series of personal setbacks that left him bitter and struggling. His animosity towards Ethan grew as Ethan's musical career soared, and Vincent found himself neglected to less frequented quarters of the city.
Interesting that Vincent and Sophie do share the last name. I mean, probably not, I don't know if they're related. I mean, that's just a side note, but back to Vincent himself. So they're both competing musicians, and I guess, sounds like they were kind of competing together.
I just had to look it up right there. They are in fact not related. Vincent and Sophie they just happen to share the same last name.
So that's, I don't know, it's great. I don't know. I guess this is a similar case for Isabella and I guess Lila, because they're both competing against each other's like interests, but it's just
Well, Lila was one of the victims.
yeah.
Lila wasn't one of the original lineups. I guess the original suspects.
Yeah.
Given all of this, though, Dom, who would you think from that original lineup would be the most likely killer?
Oh, jeez. I don't know. I honestly.
If you need a recap, the original lineup was Millie Donovan, rival cheerleader.
Okay.
Gabrielle Diaz, another drifter near Oliver and Ethan's areas.
Okay, so
Sophie Miller, high school classmate with an unrequited crush on John. Isabella Ramirez, the art critic, or Vincent Miller, street musician.
I'm stuck between Isabella Ramirez and Sophie Miller. So, I mean, I'm stuck between those two. So it sounds like, I mean, yes, from a recap with Sophie, yep, she liked him, but then once he became popular, it's like that sound like something snapped in her, and all of a sudden, lights are out. I'm probably leaning more towards Sophie.
Honestly, I think that that's what I thought first, pretty much. Because those details about literally having a shrine of John's friggin' countless pictures in the attic, that's creepy. I mean, for a start, that's creepy. But it's things like that are unfortunate whenever that happens, where it's like John might not have been being rude or whatever. It's just he might have legitimately had more friends than maybe a year ago, right? But Sophie could have misconstrued that as, well, his attention's not on me anymore, so that sucks. It is funny you say. It's just, as it turns out, none of these suspects were the actual killer. These were just the original lineup of people that the investigators originally thought, hey, you know what? This person could be suspicious for this reason. And so they were called in for a nice little talking to, let's just say.
Like innocent until proven guilty. So it sounds like they could be innocent. Sounds like they're innocent.
They all definitely were proven innocent because all of them had the good old A word, alibi. buys. There we go.
Yeah.
It shows with enough evidence and belief that anyone can look like they committed a crime or just did a thing. It doesn't even have to be a crime, right? If you have, you know, white powder on your nose, then
Yeah.
it looks like you did something,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's not really the case.
What are you talking about? I was just baking a cake.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, baking, I guess, aside, let's get into how the killer was caught.
Mhm.
You kind of got a little bit of an idea. Um, right on.
Yeah.
One of the investigators from the crime scene on Miss Martinez had discovered the black marker X, which were scribbled on different parts of the previous victims' bodies, and they were deliberately done. Gavin Duvoir. Gavin Duvoir had noticed that one victim's ring fingers were marked, one victim's forehead was marked, one had been marked on their kneecaps, one on their abdomen, and the other on their nose. Gavin had written down each placement that the X's appeared on a piece of paper and noticed that the parts all started with the letters R, F, K, A, and N. It didn't take Gavin long to try the other combinations of the letters, which led to the new order of F, R, A, N, K.
Mm. The old German sausage.
Or a name.
Yeah.
Gavin knew that the killer had to be somehow connected to the name Frank. But how was the next piece of the puzzle?
Hmm.
Gavin ended up sharing his findings with another investigator, Barry the Sting Benson, who had, who had suggested Franklin's welding and fabrication as being the place of interest. A local company that specializes in fiberglass installation.
Hmm. Could that be the name of the killer? Frank? I'm just curious here.
It it's a start. It's definitely a start. It's believable that it could be Franklin. As the investigators delved deeper into the grisly string of murders, the distinctive pattern of the attic attacker's selection of crime scenes began to emerge. The eerie realization that each victim's final resting place was tied to Franklin's welding and fabrication customers sent shockwaves through the town. Gavin and Barry found themselves navigating a maze of connections, examining the customer list with a heightened sense of scrutiny. The attic attacker's calculated approach became increasingly apparent. It wasn't just about gaining access to attics, it was about deliberate choice, a dark dance with his own past. Franklin's customer base transformed from a routine business aspect to a chilling map of potential crime scenes. Each victim a pawn in a twisted game that hinged on the killer's intimate knowledge of these private spaces.
I don't know. There's just still a lot to unpack here. Now we're
And
talking about a welding company, which we did describe earlier that the guy worked at, only to get fired. Do you think it's possible there was something they didn't like about him? And they were like, you're fired.
I would not say no to that, I guess.
Well, it's just a guess. Of course, we don't know.
Well, I kind of did some research and I kind of have an explanation, but it's kind of close to that in a way. So as the investigators zeroed in on the correlation between the victims' locations and Franklin's clientele, they faced the daunting task of sifting through the countless records and testimonies. The attic attacker's dual life, a veneer of professionalism concealing a sinister reality, left an unsettling trail. The welding company, once seen as a pillar of the community, now harbored secrets that echoed the traumas of its former employee. Rumors and suspicions circulated through the town, casting shadows on familiar faces. Franklin's welding fabrication, once a symbol of reliability, is now a haunting backdrop for the investigation. The interconnectedness of the victims and their shared link to this local business underscored the vulnerability within the community, raising questions about trust and the hidden dangers lurking beneath seemingly ordinary surfaces.
So, yeah, there's this. This is like it's like a connect the dots scenario here.
Yes. And as the dots were, I guess, coming to a close, as the investigators closed in on the attic attacker, the culmination of their efforts a mix of relief and unease. The revelation that the killer had used his knowledge of Franklin's welding and fabrication to meticulously plan and execute the murders sent shockwaves throughout the community.
So he probably gave the company a bad name when it came to those. So he literally took the knowledge from that and just, here you go.
Breakthrough in identifying the attic attacker as Jason Myers came from a meticulous examination of the customer records. One name constantly stood out, and that's Jason's, appearing in the records during his tenure at the welding company. The investigators pieced together a timeline, connecting the dots between his abrupt departure from Franklin's, the patterns of the murders, and the targeted locations. With mounting evidence, Gavin and Barry confronted Jason Myers at his current residence, a place that once again echoed with the disturbing duality of his life. As the cuffs clicked into place, Jason's on and off switch flickered one last time, revealing a fractured psyche of a man who had harbored a lifetime of rage and dismay.
Oh, so, I think we're figuring it out already.
The small town grappled with the aftermath, questioning the boundaries between professional relationships and personal security. The attic attacker's reign of terror had left an indelible mark, a stark reminder that even in the most ordinary places, the extraordinary and the malevolent could coexist. The resolution of the case brought a semblance of justice, but the scars it left behind serve as a haunting reminder of the fine line between normalcy and darkness.
Is there any sketches of this guy?
There is, if you wanted to look look him up. We're not gonna put him in the actual episode because why would we?
Well,
But if you did want to look up a mugshot, you can. You could see the friggin' those dead, sullen, sunken in eyes. Um, that's after he's been caught. If you're looking at it right now, um, you can see just how creepy the guy is, but you can also see kind of how people trusted the guy. You see like a little bit of both aspects in that. Like, he kind of looks like a monster in this photo, but you can imagine 30 minutes ago in that photo that he was probably just a normal dude, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And what do you think about that one feature? The one thing that might stand out on his face?
Is there like that whole wait, the X's and stuff?
It kind of has like a birthmark, kind of in between, I would say, like his eyelid and his eyebrow. It kind of has like a little X birthmark.
So maybe that's what he was trying to go for.
I mean, this is all speculation. It could be.
I don't. I'm. Yeah.
We don't know. We couldn't know because we are not him.
Mhm. Yeah.
I always think that whenever I listen to different crime scene, or I guess a crime podcast like this, one of the fascinating parts of it is listening, or I guess reading transcripts of some I guess interrogations.
Mhm.
Um, do you want to hear some interrogation bits?
Sure.
Obviously, not gonna play 5 days of conversation to you, but because this guy did talk, right? Like, he's very poetic, it seems.
Mhm.
Um, very fluffy when it comes to words, which you might see pretty quickly. But yeah. So I selected some snippets to kind of give you an idea of, I guess, the investigators and Myers's personalities. So,
All right.
all right. You know what? I'm gonna establish this right now. Um, I'll read Mr. Duval's lines. I'll read his words like this, but I'll read Myers' words like this, right? Something like that. Because he's kind of a snotty guy, right?
Yeah.
Why, Myers? Why did you target these innocent people? Innocent? There's no such thing, Inspector. Everyone's got their demons. I just made them visible. I think he's a scumbag. You see that?
Yeah.
You can hear that.
He doesn't sound like he has any remorse for what he's done.
There's no such thing as innocent. Way to put yourself on a high pedestal there.
Oh, there's no such thing as innocent. And who cares? It's like, wow, this guy's got. Does he not feel any sorrow or any shame?
We'll see. Um, Duval, this is another part. Your childhood, your mother. Did that twisted upbringing lead you to this? And he's smirking at this point. I saw the footage. It's very unsettling. Oh, child and scars? The perfect excuse, right? Maybe it played a part, but I'm not here to psychoanalyze myself. So he's kind of smart at that bit, but like still like a bitch, you know?
Like, he doesn't want to fully admit it, but he knows that's part of why.
But it honestly just seems like he's trying to get away with, oh, this is just because of my childhood, right? Because, oh, but I don't know if you know this, Dom, but other people have just as bad childhoods, but end up rocking in the real world, right?
Yeah, I mean,
They grow up and they grow past it. They become stronger.
they literally persevere from it
They persevere
through
from it, right?
tons of things.
Continuing
But
on,
in this, okay,
your victims, their families, did their suffering amuse you? And here he leans in, kind of whispers, "You might like the smile on my face, Inspector, but once you push me to the edge, you'll face the dark side of me, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life."
as if that's supposed to fear the officer.
I mean, Duval's probably like met like 3-year-olds who are scarier than this guy, right?
Probably
Like,
even the little kid that goes boo, and the officer flies from his falls on its back from his chair.
and honestly, I think it's in their job description to pretend like they're afraid of little children if they go boo, right? I think that's part of it. No.
But yeah, but I don't think this guy is phased by Mr. Myers.
Yeah, he's a goat, man. Like is the greatest of all time, it seems. And Duval continues with Franklin's welding and fabrication. Why the hell did you target your former workplace? Franklin was the perfect scapegoat. Fired me, shattered my professional respect. I just made sure he tasted the bitterness of regret. It's not every day an employee of yours finishes. Whoops. It's not every day an employee of yours tarnishes your reputation. You weren't an employee at that point, though. Why couldn't you just take the termination and walk away? Now, where's the fun in that?
Of course, he couldn't just take any, take the blame and walk away. But nope, take it a whole step further.
I mean, this would be the same exact thing as if a year ago, or at this point, maybe a year and a half ago, I went back and, you know, did some things because I was fired too, right? That's just not the way to go with it. Honestly, it's if he just went to another fabricator because that wasn't the only fabrication and welding place in
No, but
the town. He could have went on to maybe go to a better place than
mhm.
Franklin's. But no.
He still has to put that in his resume if he's applying for a new job. Oh, why did you get fired? Oh, this, this and this happened. But yeah,
I mean, he wasn't fired because of the crimes that happened after.
hmm
Don't get that. Don't get that one confused.
hmm
Um, now this is a part that you actually thought of a little bit before. Um, the black X marks. What was the significance? There isn't any. You probably figured out that they were placed on specific areas. That's it. Framing the boss. It failed. So what?
Oh, really? So it's almost like you had this little treasure chest thing. It's like, oh, I don't know, or follow the follow the
Yeah.
path to this thing. You figured out the puzzle. Woo! You get a reward.
Honestly, though, that's probably partly where it could have stemmed from, because the X marks the spot, and if there are many X's, well, those spots must be important. So it's a good thing that Duval and Benson uh,
Mhm.
saw the pattern.
Yeah.
Eventually, they saw the pattern anyway. Unfortunately, of course, there had to be more victims in order for them to get the whole message. But
Yeah.
yeah, they got the victims all right.
Instead of yeah, they did.
And the last interrogation part that I felt exemplifies, you know, those two personalities is part of the final 30 minutes. Um, or I guess the final 10 minutes, really. Um, you won't escape this, Myers. Your reign of terror ends here. And he's smirking. Does it, Inspector? We'll see about that. There's always a shadow waiting to emerge. Just because you snuffed this flame doesn't mean there won't be more.
Sounds like he's implying, oh, this won't be the last time you'll see me. I'll be back.
Whether he's back or maybe a gang or something, or maybe it's just unrelated. It could be. Well, you got me, but there are definitely going to be more people doing things like this out there. You just know that I'm not on the street anymore doing it.
Yeah.
Which, yes, it's accurate, unfortunately so, but that's still not the way to conclude an interrogation, my man. Hey, after this interrogation, what would you think you'd be doing? And then, obviously, there are some interrogations where this happens, but Myers then goes, I plead the fifth.
Mhm.
Which, I mean, that's probably the smartest thing he's ever said. Just, just
Well,
shut up, my dude, really.
let's see. I don't know. It's
What a
just like, I don't know.
scumbag.
I don't know. I don't know. I think this dude needs to be locked up for life.
And luckily, he is. Luckily, yes, he was sentenced for 2 consecutive life terms, plus 5 years, 1 additional year for each victim, at Alberta State Penitentiary in New Mexico.
That's crazy.
And this event happened 15 years ago.
Jeez, we were little kids this time.
Luckily, we were nowhere near Alberta, New Mexico, but
Yeah.
the stories of the victims do ring loudly.
Still something to think of because this just proves that the world is really unpredictable.
Well, the world is unpredictable, but the people that inhabit it, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I don't know, it's like you never know what could happen, really. I just this is just one of the most insane cases I've even heard.
And that's the unfortunate case of the victims of the attic attacker, otherwise known as Jason Myers. Now, Dom, how did this make you feel?
Oh my god, it just makes me feel bad for not only the families of these victims, but also the friends too. Because now they've lost a friend, or in the family's cases, like any relatives, like a cousin or a son. It's just they're gonna now they're not gonna stop thinking about this guy, or they're not gonna stop thinking about these victims.
And the busking still happens at 5 p.m. That still happens even 15 years later. Obviously, different performers are performing now than they used to, um,
Yeah.
but Ethan, his is still being, I guess, mourned
Mm-hmm.
every single week, every Tuesday at 5 p.m.
Yeah. It's like these relatives and friends, they're gonna have a hard time sleeping at night.
After 15 years, there's also the John Davis and Sandra Wilcox athletic field.
Mm-hmm.
Sandra Wilcox having the softball field, and John
Mm.
Davis having the football field.
Yeah. Well, they have to, because these were the most influential people in their respected towns.
Lila Martinez, all of the murals are still up. Some of them even being, what's the word? Uh, Revitalized, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the weather might wear and tear some things, right? It might make a mural look a little less impressive. Some artists, including Isabella, have made an effort to keep the murals up, which
Mm-hmm.
that's some character growth on Isabella's part.
Yeah. I mean, sounds like a big improvement.
The only the only person who's not actively mourned in Alberta, New Mexico is Oliver. That's because he was a drifter that nobody really knew. However, back in his hometown of Honolulu, Alaska, there's there was a big celebration of his life there.
Hmm. Oh, they got it. They have to. Well, at least some people knew who he was.
And all because they thought about linking a missing person to an event like this. It's
Mm-hmm.
the only reason why he was labeled as a name instead of just a nobody,
Mm-hmm.
just another victim.
Yeah. They shall rest in peace.
They shall.
Yeah.
And everyone out there, remember their names.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you all for listening to this episode of the DomJake podcast. We'd appreciate it if you did all the YouTube things.
And I hope all of you can manage to sleep after this one, because for me personally, this will be quite a task.
It'll kind of be hard to think about sleeping whenever you know that events like this happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's bad enough that I sometimes have a hard time sleeping, but this is just gonna make it more of a challenge.
Well, if this does help anybody, at least we know Myers is in the facility for pretty much for the rest of his life. Let's be honest.
Well, that's where the guy belongs. All right.
So once again, thank you for listening. Have a great one, everyone.